Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. We are Team Solar, and we're so excited for everyone to join us today and be able to present our projects with you this evening. My name is Ava Litzinger.
I'm Adam Whalen.
I'm Avery.
Andrew. I'm Connor.
I'm Sophie.
I'm Spencer.
I'm Stewart.
Okay, so just to start off our presentation, our main clients for our project were Headwater Energy and Carolina Solar. Headwater Energy was founded in 2012 with an expertise in electrical development. They initially bought the solar farm here at Elon with plans of improving operations and engaging with students. Carolina Solar was founded by Zach Hobbs, and they manage the operations and maintenance of the solar farm. So at our first partner meeting with our clients, we went over some of the goals that we wanted to achieve this semester. Some of these goals were increasing awareness in agrivoltaics and land use, exploring the feasibility of battery energy storage systems and implementing them at the farm, expanding rooftop solar at Elon. We already have some solar panels here at Elon, and we wanted just to look to see if that was possible to expand that. They also wanted us to learn regulatory and policy constraints, understanding Duke's monopoly structure in North Carolina and how that limits on-site expansion or direct sales to Elon. And then lastly, Headwater really wanted us to involve the community and campus in some way. So whatever our project was going to be, that was kind of going to be the heartbeat of it.
Yeah, so for our approach, when first looking at the rooftop expansion of solar, we went to the sustainability office to figure out what is Elon's current solar energy plan, and what departments we would have to do to help expand rooftop solar at Elon. And lastly, would it be feasible to expand rooftop solar? And the sustainability office really helped inform us that it wouldn't quite be in our scope and quite possible for us to help expand, because it's a larger process than we had initially realized.
So our next approach was battery energy storage systems, where we looked at costs, stakeholders, and some of the rules and regulations surrounding them. We quickly realized that it takes multiple years to incorporate a BESS into an actual solar farm, and so we realized that it wouldn't be feasible in the short amount of time that we had. However, it is a possibility for the future.
Right, so after realizing that our first two kind of main objectives were proven to not be feasible, we decided to rotate back to the agrivoltaics piece of this project. So in the past years, many other solar groups have attempted to implement agrivoltaics to the solar farm, however, have been met up with regulatory constraints from the town. So we decided to maybe go through a trial event where we could have one day to bring agrivoltaics to Elon. And in that event, we wanted to figure out who's going to be there, how are we going to get people to come, and also what kind of regulatory constraints are we going to have to go through.
So once we decided that we wanted to have an agrivoltaics event, we were posed with the question, what exactly is agrivoltaics? And many of you, just like us at the beginning of the project, might not know what that is. The definition of agrivoltaics is the dual land use of agriculture and solar photovoltaic electricity generation. So this could be including solar panels with any form of agriculture. In our case, we used sheep grazing and pollinator beds. To learn a little bit more about agrivoltaics in a professional setting, we went to the Sunday Festival in Raleigh, where we were actually able to meet professionals and have the opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of what this concept really was. And once we had all of that knowledge, we then knew that we had to identify our key stakeholders.
So on to our key stakeholders of our project. So we have Cheryl from Little Cedar Farm. She's located and based in Elon, North Carolina. She's very enthusiastic and passionate about her sheep, and she was very excited to be the ones providing the sheep for our solar grazing event that is involving the sheep, bringing them on to graze and manage the vegetations in and around our solar panels, and being an educational opportunity for students and the local community. We had Latham Grimes and Zach Hobbs from Headwater Energy and Carolina Solar Services, respectively. They're our main clients and stakeholder. Also, huge thanks to the Elon Sustainability and Environmental Science Department, and also the Loy Farm Management as well, for supporting the event. We also had Solar Equity. They are a professional reference from Latham, from Headwater. They have previously worked with them, a student group, nonprofit organization that worked with affordable housing and solar energy development based in the UNC Chapel Hill region. We also had the Elon Eco Reps. They are part of the extension of the Office of Sustainability here on campus. They promote environmental well-being and sustainability all around campus. And finally, we had the Elon Academy. It's a program where Elon students work with high school students to mentor and tutor them, and we wanted them to be our main core demographic.
Yeah, so onto our concept maps. Concept maps are a primary tool for project management. As the project progressed, you update your concept map with new ideas that you have. So the concept map on the left is our original ideas at the beginning of the semester, which included our original goals and accomplishments. And then the concept map on the right is after we adapted our thoughts, we changed our concept map, updated it, and this is kind of what our final project looked like.
Right, so getting to the challenges behind implementing agrivoltaics. So the first time that we reached out to someone from town, we reached out to the mayor, who then kind of referred us to Lori Oakley, who's responsible for land use management around the town. She then responded with an email forwarding us to the certain law for the town, Chapter 6, Section 3, which states that essentially every single livestock animal that we use in an agrivoltaic system is barred from being held in the corporate limits of the town. So, unless for therapeutic reasonings. So that's kind of the route that we wanted to go down. There's no national body that standardizes livestock animals as therapeutic or for therapeutic purposes. And given recent trends in climate anxieties, and a recent study from Harvard showed that in people ages 16 to 25, 60% of those are experiencing climate anxieties, and half of that is half of the anxiety is experienced every day, which is affecting their daily lives. So, given that this new upcoming and exciting field is very sustainable and highly enactable, we thought that this would be permissible underneath the wellness.
So the next difficulty that we had was getting school permission, specifically finding out who we needed permission from. This included Mosley Center, Loy Farm, and help from the Environmental Studies Department.
So a main priority for creating our event was the educational aspect and experience for our attendees. So obviously our key priority was the live demonstration of agrivoltaics with the use of sheep. And we chose sheep specifically because of their grazing patterns, and they're more docile, and they're just more, they have grazing patterns. Our key focus was a live demonstration as well with the event pamphlet that was provided at the welcome desk with the title Grace the Grid. It had a quick background of agrivoltaics, kind of why they mattered, how they're a sustainable farming method, and a great solution to climate change. We also had an event schedule, activities for our attendants to do, and we had a QR code, a link to Elon's Sustainability Office, and kind of overall the campus's energy efficiency goals. We also had 2 research boards that presented our individual research. One was kind of, again, Elon's sustainability efforts, including our event at Loy, and then the economic benefits of agrivoltaics. And we also had 2 information boards with speakers from Solar Equity and Eco Reps. We also had speaker Cheryl, who is our shepherd. She discussed animal rights, specifically with the animals grazing under the solar panels. We also had Latham from Headwater, who gave a tour through the solar field and spoke about solar panels and also the energy from them.
And picking up where the previous Team Solar left off, we decided to revitalize the pollinator beds. A lot of our event was kind of centered around the grazing aspect of agrivoltaics, but the pollinator garden demonstrates a different piece of that. We explained benefits of utilizing agrivoltaics by planting native grasses and wildflowers on the solar field with a planting activity, which has been shown to greatly benefit local pollinator populations.
We also included a flyer that we spread around campus to gain attraction for our event with, again, the name of our event, the location, and the different attractions for people there.
Yeah, so then taking these advertisement and promotional materials, we reached out to environmental courses and professors, and we documented our progress, all that we reached out to, and all the students that we have interacted with to get excited for the event through this.
Yeah, and part of our process for getting people engaged, we wanted to have things that people can engage with there, so we included refreshments like apple cider and ice cream, and we had lawn games that people could have fun with during and in between our presentations, and we also had our little petting area for the sheep so they could get a close-up interaction.
And now to shift to some of the outcomes that we had from all of our planning this semester. The day that we hosted our Graze and Grid event, we successfully demonstrated an agrivoltaics grazing trial at the Elon Loy Solar Farm. We welcomed over 100 people in attendance, and they ranged from 24 different study disciplines and majors. As you can see on your left, environmental studies and finance were the two largest groups that we had at this event, but we also had some participation from those in nursing, engineering, and computer science, and I think that really goes to show kind of the interdisciplinary nature of a project that involves agrivoltaics. As we touched on in the educational aspect slide, we also successfully facilitated a 3-part speaker series with Latham and Cheryl, and we ended with a question and answer from Team Solar to wrap up the event. That kind of just concluded with any lingering questions, what resonated with everyone throughout the day. And yeah, we also were able to get extensive news coverage from the Elon News Network. And if you're not familiar with the Elon News Network, they're a student-led network by students for students. And we were featured in one of their segments on ENS Tonight, as you can see up on the board. And they also published a news article that included some interviews from our stakeholders and participants. And that news article had 162 reads, and also an Instagram reel that had 1,630 views. So our outreach was way more than we could have anticipated.
So as far as things we could have done differently, our actual event went really smoothly, and I don't think there's any major changes we would make there. But there are some places we could have better allocated our time. At the start of the year, our project was moving in a lot of different directions, and as we figured out what was feasible and what wasn't, we kind of refined things from there. But if we were to do this over again, we would have spent that time on doing additional outreach for the event.
So the last question to answer now is really like, what can we leave for the future? What can we leave for the next Team Solar? And we're trying to leave them this open connection, open communication with our key stakeholders. We have open connection and communications to Cheryl the Shepherd. We have Latham and Zach from Headwater Energy and Carolina Solar, respectively. We have Solar Equity. And there is very much an interest to establish, potentially ongoing annual Grazing the Grid event to continue serving as an educational opportunity to the greater community and Elon students. And this also really goes into helping ease climate anxiety that has very much been part of everybody's mind up until now. And also us students, leaving a legacy behind, can continue to advocate for and stand for environmental justice and sustainability and solar energy development within Elon's own community.
And then before we open up the floor to questions, we just wanted to say a special thank you to our project partners and clients, Latham and Zach. Also, Cheryl and Thomas Corey for letting us borrow Penelope and Snowflake for the day. And our professors, Professor Rutz and Dr. Strickland. We wouldn't have been able to do this without you guys. Thank you. And if there's any questions, we would love to answer them. Yes, Dr. Benning.
You all mentioned that in order for this to become permanent, you would need to demonstrate there was some therapeutic value to the animals. Have you thought at all about what it might look like to work on demonstrating that to the town and through this event?
Right, so what we were actually kind of thinking about to get this permanently implemented was continuing these events until the time where it gets the surrounding community kind of more familiar with it, to the point where it can get a variance passed just for Elon University on its own. Whereas, when you get into like the whole thing of trying to change the whole rezoning of everything and continue that therapeuticness, it can also get out of touch with what your definition really is.
did a lot of research into the solar energy through this whole process. I'm sure it's really eye-opening. I'd like to hear what are your perceptions of the challenges and the barriers you ran into about solar energy broadly, or you all engaging in projects?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of regulatory constraints surrounding the Duke Energy monopoly, where basically right now the solar energy that we generate at Loy Farm just goes straight back to Duke, and we actually aren't able to use that energy legally. So a lot of the other costs that they talked about too was when trying to implement solar around here is the low return on investment, or the lengthy time that it takes on to build solar around here, and also other constraints consist of like the age of like your roof, you know, where it's if you want to put up a new solar panel and you have to change the roof in 5 years, is that really cost effective?
Yeah, I want to expand a little bit about that. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, like, I wanted to add that Kelly from the Office of Sustainability has told us, you know, like, given a demonstration of the solar farm, and even though, like, in the state of North Carolina, within Elon, like, that wouldn't be going to us necessarily, having it there, like, shows our support for it, and very much shows, like, our commitment to it, you know, even if it is currently infeasible or cannot be changed.
Yeah, so kind of like what Adam mentioned, Duke Energy has a monopoly on the state of North Carolina for solar. That doesn't allow, so to build any new solar fields, you have to plan with them and coordinate with Duke Energy. And that is one of the reasons, and one of the big challenges that we came in with, is none of the energy produced by the Elon solar farm is actually going to Elon University. It's all going back into the community. So that was one of the really big challenges that we kind of ran into.
Economically, if you're gonna raise the solar farm with those sheep, is it more affordable than mowing it and maintaining that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So research shows that grazing or maintaining agriculture and forage with sheep cuts about 30% of costs from conventional methods like mowing under panels. Also for sheep too, you get to you can harvest them or sell them after they graze. So it's very economically feasible.
Thank you, guys.
Hello. Thank you all for being here. My name is Ava.
I'm Rosie.
I'm Kendall.
I'm Melissa.
I'm Nate.
I'm Zach.
I'm Kelly.
I'm Jake.
And this semester, our group worked with Trees for the Triangle.
We have been working alongside Trees for the Triangle to provide the protection and environmental benefits of tree planting to communities in the Research Triangle area of North Carolina, ensuring that the organization's core belief in tree equity is part of our research mission. Trees for the Triangle was founded by Dave Klemp to maintain a healthy tree canopy for the Research Triangle area as its population grows. And to help, we have prioritized GIS mapping of priority planning areas to mitigate flooding events and have participated in a variety of events with the goal of educating and providing support for the organization, as well as steady research that may be applied to future grant proposals.
At the beginning of the semester, we created a concept map to show important aspects of our project and research to be conducted. Then, as the semester progressed, our map evolved to show the importance of hands-on events and GIS mapping for our partner, as well as demonstrating which subjects were most important to keep in mind for future grant proposals.
So these are our original project management plans from the beginning of the semester. In making these, we knew our end goal, who would be doing what parts, and why we were doing those things, but we weren't clearly articulating the steps that we would be taking to achieve those goals. So moving forward, our final project management plan was a clear timeline depicting our process. We have clear due dates for deliverables and objectives we wanted to meet, as well as events we would be attending to assist Trees for the Triangle. All of our work ended up culminating in our story map deliverable.
All right, so we started by having the idea of analyzing these flood risk zones in the Research Triangle. We started out by looking at the 3 counties, Orange, Durham, and Wake, and then selected Wake County as our main county to work on due to our processing extent as well as time constraints. So we did a criteria analysis where we looked at different geospatial layers. We were able to combine them based on a ranking system 1 through 5 and combine them into flood risk zones. So we followed this paper by Danielle Rincon et al. From 2018, following a case study in Toronto, Canada, where they did this multi-criterial analysis using GIS to map flood risk zones in Toronto. The reason we followed this study is because they had a clear workflow that was replicable in our area, as well as they used DEM layers and publicly accessible layers that we'll cover later on. They also standardized these layers.
All right, topographical and terrain considerations. So when planning flood mitigation with trees, we use high resolution LiDAR DEMs, digital elevation model that you see on the left. The high is in red and the low is in blue, with the flood prone soils highlighted in yellow there. Easy to access. The DEMs reveal the bare ground surface beneath the trees and the buildings. What this does is it helps us understand how water will collect and flow across the landscape. We analyze slope percentages from these digital elevation models to find areas where tree roots can firmly establish soils, or firmly established in soils and can effectively absorb water. And trees planted on moderate slopes slow runoff and improve infiltration, while very flat areas hold water too long and steep areas drain too quickly. And like you can see on the right, that is a Wake County soil slope percent map with the legend on the bottom showing the more vibrant colors being the more steep slopes.
Right, you can press it one more time. So following what Jake was saying, we use these terrain-based models, and these models these data sources we can find online, publicly available, and we were able to reclassify them into zones 1 through 5, ranking from very low being 1, very high being 5. We did this for slope, which is S, hand, which is height above nearest drainage, which basically is just the vertical distance from the nearest drainage point. Distance to streams, which is just the distance from a stream. The curve number is the infiltration rate, taking into consideration the soil data like we were just looking at, as well as land cover. And then the last one we had was floodplain, and whether it was in or out. The two in the middle that are towards the end you don't see, which are total precipitation and effective precipitation in scenarios 3 and 4. We didn't use those because the precipitation data was not publicly accessible, or at least we could not find it easily. So we decided to use scenario 1, which puts those 5 variables together in order to map flood risk. So go to the next slide. And you can press 1 more. So here we classified flood risk with those 5 layers, and we put them together in one map, which is the scenario 1. The key 1 to 5 is the flood risk, 5 being the most vulnerable. As you can see, when we put it all together in the GIS program, we put the layers in a raster calculator, which basically computes the different layers by the weights assigned to them, which were all from that article we mentioned before. This one, scenario 1, floodplain is the most weighted category, making it a more historically based FEMA floodplain. So our floodplain data came from FEMA, which is the National Floodplain or Flood website, and so that's more historically backed up data.
So then after this, thank you. So then after this, we wanted to take a look at the social vulnerability to see which groups might be more affected in those flood risk zones. So, using Rincon et al.'s study, we discussed as a group the power of each of those social vulnerability factors that they looked at in the article. These include factors such as age. People that are older might be more prone to having troubles with flood risk. Race, education, renting versus owning, and many other factors. We then boiled these down into 4 categories that would be best to be able to address what might be have more like social vulnerability. So we went with tree equity, or like racial equity as well, with in terms of the environment. Percent above 65 and older in age, the population density, and the income per capita. And these are for each of the block groups in Wake County. So you can go on next. So afterwards, then using ArcGIS Pro, we mapped population density, per capita income, the percentages of people of color, and those 65 and older for each of the block groups. Then the top 20 block groups were selected in each of the categories. So we had the top 20 lowest per capita incomes, the top 20 highest population densities, the top 20 block groups with the highest percentages of people of color, and so on and so forth with those 65 years and older. Finally, we then overlaid the FRIS data, and it was essentially like shape files and polygons in order to show where like each of the block groups they might have more flood risk. And then so we took all the other block groups out that were not involved. So we were left with this. And there, as you can see, there's little clumps kind of towards the southeast of Raleigh, towards the northern part of the St. Mary's Township, and then a lot towards the southwest of Raleigh as well.
Awesome. So now that we've identified flood risk zones as well as vulnerable populations, we know where flood can happen and who it affects the most. So we were able to put those two maps together and show the block groups which are affected most demographically. So the ones selected here, this is just a bigger map and then these are just zoom-ins. So these are all tree equity scores, which kind of takes in all those variables Nate was talking about before. And these are all ones less than 80. And that's the kind of level we set to examine deeper and to compare with the other flood risk zones. So when you zoom in here, this is over here in Morrisville, which is west of Raleigh. Right here is the capital of the state, right in the center. And you can see there's areas that intersect with the flood risk zones of 5, 4, and 3. They have low tree equity scores. You see the same up near Wake Forest, and then you see the same right in the city. This one of 58 is the lowest we saw. It's actually right in NC State's campus. That is where their Greek neighborhood is. So, use some true Also, we put all our maps together in this overall. You can press the arrow one time; it'll play. This story map, which is a product from ArcGIS Pro, which is what we use to do all our mapping. And we are able to put all our information in this website, basically, that is hosted within the ArcGIS website. And it's there for informative purposes, for any sort of data you can look into. It has all our maps, our work thought, and our meaning behind it, as well as references to back it up.
So in addition to our research and mapping that we wanted to do, we wanted to get involved with Trees for the Triangle as well. And so in the beginning of our mapping process, we were able to have the opportunity to volunteer with Trees for the Triangle at a tree planting event. So we did a lot of prep work. We dug out the holes of where the trees were going, brought each sapling to the area that they're going to be planted. And it was a really fun way to get to know the people that we were working for and working with, and also be able to see what a feasible site for these planting events look like, since that was our goal of places to find. And then we also wanted to get involved with another event, a free tree giveaway that happened on November 30th. So to help with this, we created a few advertisements for them to post and give out and get the community aware of it and sign up for the event. And then we also created a pamphlet with information on Trees for the Triangle to hand out access to their sign-up page for volunteering and just give people in the community as much information as we could about the organization. And then we also provided an updated tree care guide to hand out with each tree so that we could ensure that everyone has the information that they need to plant the tree properly and make sure you see its benefits and it lasts for a long time. And then we also had 2 interactive elements at the event. We had a Plant Your Promise board where community members could write an environmental promise on a leaf and add it to the community tree. And then we also handed out name your tree tags that people could write their name on, or a name for the tree on, or dedicate the tree, and then also mark when and where it was planted.
So here are some photos from the event. Before the event started, on the flyer there was a QR code and people could sign up for what tree they wanted to plant. All the tree species that were chosen are native to the area and they are helpful for mitigating floods. Some of the species were the pawpaw, the serviceberry, bald cypress, and the little gem magnolia. Our role was to hand out pamphlets and just engage with the community. We were able to tell them about what we're doing with Trees for the Triangle and then build our little community board. And it was really a wonderful time being able to talk with everyone and get to know more information about the people who are taking trees home.
So, did we reach our goal? Just to recap, our goals were to map priority planting sites, participate in events to support Trees for the Triangle, and to provide research applicable to future grant proposals. And we were able to create a story map with maps that pinpointed priority locations and had useful scientific research that will be applicable for those grant proposals. And we were also able to attend 3 events in total where we were able to provide support through physical means, as well as increase community engagement with Trees for the Triangle.
Some ways that future groups that might work with Trees for the Triangle can measure our success is, first of all, by participating in further events, similar to the picture demonstrated on the left that we were able to take with Dave. They could look at the research that we submitted for grant proposals, such as, for example, the professional expertise research document, as seen in the middle. These can be applied to grant proposals as information and context for why organizations like Trees for the Triangle are important to mitigate flood risks and increase community developments. This is a long process spanning further than the course of our semester, so hopefully future groups might be able to see some results from grant proposal research. And we make sure that our deliverables were reusable so that Trees for the Triangle can continue to do community involvement, such as the Plant Your Promise board for future events.
And we'd like to give a special thank you to lovely Dave Clem and Jean-Luc Duval from Trees for the Triangle, Jesse Ackman and the Belk Library Writing Center, and last but not least from Professors Ryan Kirk, Jacob Rutz, and Michael Strickland for all their support this semester. And now, without further ado, we'd like to open the floor for any questions.
For the model that you had up, you said that the baseline was 80. Why was it 80?
That's just the range of the tree equity scores. They range from 0 to 100, 0 being, I guess, no tree cover. The ones we saw, they were mostly above 80, and then those ones we selected were below. So we kind of just selected those just because they were the ones that stuck out the most, and they're the ones that needed the most help. So those were all the targeted.
Is there anything to say? Do you have any information trees are less in Wake County than it has been, say, 10 years ago with all the development and growth that Wake County has gone through and it wiped out all the trees?
So the question was, do we have historical data on the tree coverage in Wake County? There probably is data on that. We did not look into that specifically. That could be something going forward that groups look into, is the historical trends and the way they've gone from time.
One might support that program if they see how it keeps declining with population growth.
One similar topic that we looked into was about the increase in unstable weather patterns from climate change. So while not necessarily showing the effects of decreasing tree canopy cover, we did look into how predictability has been getting a lot more difficult and severe with the changing weather patterns from climate change, and how our reactions to these need to change in order to have more effective flood mitigation.
We also did research on urbanization and the surrounding areas of urbanization as well, and we did see that there was a larger increase in impervious surfaces and urbanization, like especially like in Raleigh as well. So they're very similar. Yeah.
How does it work after the plantings and all the trees and exactly what they call removed, the
So one thing that we did provide with one of our flyer deliverables was a way for people to document where they planted their trees from the giveaway, so that in the future Trees for the Triangle can check up on these trees and make sure that they're still being well kept and that they were planted properly to increase the longevity.
Also at the tree giveaway, the trees are going back to people and they're taking them to their property. So those are not likely to be taken, I guess. The tree plantings themselves, they are done on private and public lands, I believe. And there's always going to be a threat of tree poaching anywhere in the world. So that could be a threat, but that is kind of happens.
we also, the Candidates Day event that we were able to assist with was at the Cary Tree Archive, and we saw like old trees that had previously been planted, and we were assisting with the new plantings, and there were trees that were like a little sideways that like had experienced some damage, and we actually were able to help with those. So there is follow-up with some of the trees that are not doing as well as they could be. So.
Very good GIS analysis, but GIS is a quantitative-based analysis, and most quantitative analysis include assessments of uncertainty. What is the uncertainties and limitations of the models that you do?
Well, I'd say the models we use, like we really followed that framework, and the limitations would rely around like the data we got. I believe most of it is from 2024 or most recent. So I guess if you want to keep analyzing flood risk zones, you need to keep updating data to make sure you're looking at proper layers. As well as, I couldn't tell you the if there's a standard deviation between the different layers, but the ranking 5 to 1 kind of covers that because it is a gradient. So we really focus on those first 3, just thinking those are the most relevant.
That's where uncertainty analysis,
right?
You could assess that.
Okay.
It's really, what if you go to 2 instead of 1? But again, very good analysis.
I know one uncertainty that we found with the social vulnerability maps was not being able to incorporate every single factor. That, you know, there's people with disabilities, many like education, if you rent, and we were not able to include those, so that is one uncertainty.
That's why a variable like tree equity score is very important because that takes into account a lot of demographic factors that we have to consider.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to our presentation. We're the Highway 64 group. My name is Molly Frank, and tonight I'm joined by my group mates, Michaela Shapiro, Gabrielle Spence, Emily Leach, Audrey Knott, Reagan Mertz, and Maddie Donner. The Highway 64 project is a collection of news, events, experiences, and more in the communities off of Highway 64 in North Carolina. Throughout the semester, we have collaborated with Elon's professional writing and rhetoric students and visited cities along the highway to create a database of information where people can go to find out about climate initiatives throughout the state, as well as participating in the PWR podcast and writing our own climate stories. You can find copies of these stories as well as a QR code to the webpage on your tables. Through this project, we have found that very few people, including ourselves, were aware of the environmental initiatives being implemented in surrounding communities. Our continuous goal for this project was to create awareness of climate action in North Carolina. We feel it is extremely important to educate others about the actions groups and individuals are taking to benefit the planet, especially in the current social climate and administration, where it can appear that no one is paying our ecosystem any attention and our federal environmental organizations' funding has been minimized.
At the start of the semester, we created a project management plan outlining our goals for the project. First, we met with the professional writing and rhetoric students to develop a foundation on the grounds of our project. Then, we began reaching out to potential contacts and conducting interviews, as well as attending events throughout the Piedmont. Our next step was to write climate stories, highlighting these interviews and events to be shared on the Highway 64 website. Along with publishing our stories on the website, we participated in an episode on the Highway 64 podcast, Murphy to Manio, where we discussed and answered questions with the PWR students about our visit to the Carolina Tiger Rescue Sanctuary. Simultaneously, we created and sent out a community survey to our contacts seeking resident feedback on noticeable climate impacts and experiences faced by community members, as well as conducted research on our own individual areas of expertise. Lastly, we compiled a list of climate and environmental organizations across the state to feature in our resource hub and interactive map that is embedded on the website.
So to better prepare for the project and grow our own expertise, we each researched various topics that relate in some way to climate resiliency, such as the role of like stormwater policy or NGOs within climate resiliency. We came together and came up with a definition for climate resiliency, which we would say is the ability for a community or really anywhere to prepare, respond, and recover from climate-related disturbances. By taking on these research opportunities, we were better prepared to work with our stakeholders.
This semester, we had the opportunity to collaborate with several stakeholders, the most notable one being the PWR students. Professional writing and rhetoric is a major and minor at Elon that focuses on writing within professional contexts. We met with the PWR students every other week, and they helped us integrate and design our content on the website. Another notable stakeholder is the State Climate Office of North Carolina. They are a weather forecast service based in Raleigh. They serve as the primary scientific resource for weather and climate science for the entire state. We had the honor to be in contact with them throughout the semester and met with them a couple times. The last stakeholder that we would like to spotlight is the Deep River Riverkeeper Foundation. In total, there are 15 riverkeepers in North Carolina. We were able to make contact and conduct an insightful interview with the Deep River Riverkeeper, Stephanie Steffens. Her organization is dedicated to improving, restoring, and advocating for better water quality in the Cape Fear River Basin. We were also in contact with the Lexington Stormwater Department, the Carolina Tiger Rescue, and the Town of Elon Sustainability Department, which we will all talk about more in this presentation.
Before beginning our stories, we first had to recognize the most pressing issues that communities were facing. We gathered this information by developing a community survey, a series of questions directing respondents to give us information on what specific climate events they are dealing with. With a topic as polarized as climate change, we had to make sure our questions were not leading or suggestive. Our first test run of the survey occurred at the Lexington Barbecue Festival, where results were not only vague, but gave us limited insight onto how to target these communities. After researching different survey models, our second attempt allowed respondents to be more specific, therefore giving us better information to work with. And that feedback provided us with useful data for what strategies to focus on for these communities. With the help of North Carolina Assistant State Climatologist Corey Davis, we sent our survey to various networks across the Piedmont area and were able to reach a broader audience, ranging from the North Carolina Department of Transportation to the Town of Elon Sustainability Committee. These responses allowed us to highlight specific organizations and areas on our website and our resource hub that will benefit and educate these communities for when the next extreme weather event strikes.
The next step to our project was to go out into the communities off of Highway 64 to talk to people about their local climate initiatives and their extreme weather experiences. So the first type of events we went to were the Sunday events. For those who don't know, Sunday is a day of action founded by Bill McKibben to highlight clean energy and to confront any political barriers to its implementation. So the first event we went to was in Raleigh at Burkett Farm, where there were multiple speakers talking about their clean energy work and highlighting the solar panels on Burkett Farm and all the other climate smart strategies and devices that they use there. On the same day, some of us went to a Sunday event on Elon's campus where there was an electric car show and one in Greensboro. After going to these events and hearing from so many professionals in climate resiliency, we thought that it would add a layer to our project to get perspectives from more of a general population. So that's why we decided to go to the Lexington Barbecue Festival. We selected Lexington specifically because the PWR students highlighted that as a prime location to kind of establish a partnership with. So we walked around and talked to people about their perceptions of climate change and any stories from extreme weather events that they've experienced. And we also passed out a flyer with our survey QR code on it, so we got some responses from this. The most recent event that we went to was to visit the North Carolina Tiger Rescue, where we were able to tour their facilities and meet so many of the cute cats that were there and see the work that they're doing. And we were specifically interested in a set of tigers that they were getting from the Honduras, who were being transported because their habitat there was no longer hospitable for them, which was really impactful to learn about because it's interesting to see how it's reflective of climate change throughout the world, that tigers are doing better in the North Carolina climate than they would in their native habitat. So after attending all of these events, we wrote articles on them so that we could post them to the website and more people could learn about different events that are going on in their backyards that they might not have known were happening. We also recorded a podcast with the PWR students that is also found on our website. That was based off of the Tiger Rescue visit. And we wrote a few articles as well based off of interviews that we had with our contacts. So the goal in creating this collection of articles and the podcast was so that more people like I said, could learn about local climate initiatives that are going on in North Carolina that they maybe wouldn't have known about prior to reading the articles.
This semester, we also had the opportunity to create and develop the Environmental Resource Hub on the Highway 64 website. We felt this was needed for the Piedmont region because of the current political climate and the lack of available data on websites such as NOAA. This resource brings together diverse types of environmental organizations, non-governmental, governmental, nonprofits, and academic institutions, all in one accessible place. This is a resource that makes it easier for community members to find environmental organizations in their area and get involved in meaningful environmental work. There are embedded links in the hub that takes a user directly to each organization's main website, where they can browse local events and discover data and research being conducted in the region. Through this resource, we are building stronger statewide networks of stakeholders working towards a more sustainable future.
So within the Resource Hub, we created an interactive map that serves as a user-friendly navigation tool to not only be able to actually read about the available resources, but be able to see them geographically. So on the left is a quick snapshot of the map that we created with the tab that will pop up when one of the locations on the map is actually selected. So to give you a better idea, here's the video. And so we thought that by being embedded on the Resource Hub, it really maximizes efficiency in learning about these resources and organizations. Each specific location has a certain category and is color-coded according to that category. We have nonprofits, college and universities, non-governmental organizations, and governmental organizations. And on each tab, there are specific subcategories like their name, descriptions, contact information, their website, and their specific address.
In addition to these resources found on our website is an overview of the North Carolina Climate Office. This was a really big contributor to our project over the course of this semester, in which we were able to establish a connection with them through the Assistant State Climatologist Corey Davis, whom we are excited to have in attendance tonight. Through this connection, we were able to obtain resources that supplied us with large data collections, mapping devices, and graphic tools related to extreme weather events across the state of North Carolina. Featured in this overview is the office's climate blog. We took inspiration from this in writing our climate stories for our website as we discuss impacts on the state-specific communities in the state of North Carolina regarding these extreme weather events. We really wanted to focus on generating scientific data as something that was digestible and to those outside of the field of natural and climate sciences. You can find an overview of the Climate Office on the Climate Resiliency tab on our website.
So if we had the chance to do a few things differently, we decided that we would first spend a little bit more time focusing and finding like key stakeholders at the beginning and really finding events to go to with them and working harder with them. Like we found a few, but I think we found quite a few, but we found too many at a point, and I think identifying the key ones at the start is a good way to better use our time. We also could have gone to a few more places. We went to Lexington and we went to Pittsburgh, but that was kind of it for where we went. And our legacy, so the project will continue even if we're gone. Like the resource list is accessible, it's on a website, people will be able to look at that. There's the podcast, the survey, the map, and we also have all the stakeholders and connections we've built with the PWR students, with Lexington Stormwater, and then with the Climate Office. And we've also created a guide to the resource page and project for future students. They can look at this to learn how to update it, what to add, exactly like who to contact. It's just a great way to ease them in because for us it was intimidating to create, and so having that extra guide on how to start it would be helpful. We also, it's always important to continue updating this list because it is never going to be done, and it is one of the most important things to have because you never know what somebody needs. Somebody might need help after their house flooded, or they might have questions related to farming, and this resource list has just about everything for them. We also hope to continue educating the Highway 64 communities in the future about resources and things that exist, as well as continue to work with the North Carolina Climate Office and Lexington Stormwater in the future.
And lastly, for our semester takeaways, we aim to highlight the Highway 64 website and mission, promote climate resiliency awareness in a user-friendly manner, and make student work public and impactful. We did so by developing a public-facing resource that can continue to be expanded upon, engaged with various community members and stakeholders through interviews and event attendance, conducted individual research and merged our findings, and worked extensively with professional writing students. We would now like to thank Corey Davis from the North Carolina State Climate Office, Lexington Stormwater, Elon Professional Writing and Rhetoric students, Olivia Grady and Kaden Hallberg, our professors Jacob Rutz and Michael Strickland, Jesse Ackman from the library who helped us with our research, and the Elon Environmental Studies Department. Thank you, and we will now open the floor to questions.
On behalf of the State Climate Office, thank you for including us and for featuring us in your project. I want to commend the students. In the chances that we had to talk, I was really impressed by the knowledge that they brought, the sort of questions that they asked about climate, and the kinds of things I expect to hear from a veteran journalist, not from an undergrad student. So it was clear you guys had done your homework, that you were interested and invested. We talked a lot about storytelling. That's one of our office's goals. That's one of your project goals. So I'm curious, in the survey, were there any stories that you heard that you were really compelled by or surprised by, or that really stood out to you?
Most of the survey had to do a lot with like farm flooding. I would say that most people didn't really get into details about specific stories, but they said they had a lot of like specific rainfall problems, but not like more than details than that, I would say.
When we were at the Lexington Barbecue Festival talking to people, there was a table for like first responders and stuff like that, so we went up to them and asked them about their experiences with it, and they had some fun stories about like when there were, not fun stories, but like when there were ice storms and stuff, and like it was hard to get places and just getting so many calls, and those were definitely super interesting stories, so that was a cool person to connect with. But I don't think they responded to the survey. The survey was more like general population, maybe. Yes.
Having worked on the Highway 64 website myself, it is a wealth of knowledge across generations, and I'm wondering if you guys have any suggestions for how you could market it or disseminate it to the community, because especially with all the resources that you guys added, how more people can know about this site.
Yeah, I think that more educational outreach with this, getting more involved with the community. I know Elon Sustainability on campus, we do a lot with the local town of Elon. I think branching out into Elon with this source, as well as with other universities and colleges across the state, would be a really good start. I know with a lot of the Sunday events, they were held here on the Elon campus. We had the electric vehicle car show day, but other college campuses didn't really have a lot to do with the Sunday events, and I thought that was really interesting across the state that we were one of the small colleges that were actually getting involved with that. So I think seeing more of an expansion of this across other universities will also really help, especially with like younger generations who are really, really worried about climate change. We have a lot of climate anxiety right now. I think that's a really good place to start.
I also think like as students we get emails from administrators like multiple times a week, or like student body president and stuff. So I think including them in the knowledge would also be beneficial because they have the resources to send that out to the entire student body. So just getting more people to know.
I think it also could be helpful to make sure, I'm not sure how this would work, but like when you Google something, to make sure that the Highway 64 website is something that would come up when you search for certain terms, or if you're searching for organizations in North Carolina, because we spent all this time like making this big like list of resources. So if it would come up kind of towards the top of the list, I don't know how somebody would make that happen, but it would be easier for people to access.
You start with the definition of climate resiliency planning. All your research, all these people you've talked to, what has been most inspiring actionable things for having more resilient communities?
I think the most inspiring thing was just noticing that people cared, really. Like I feel like, I don't know, living in North Carolina, you wouldn't expect that people have that much knowledge about environmental science or like what's going on in the climate besides Elon, it's like a private institution. So I feel like, yeah, it was just inspiring to hear that people are actually doing things to care. Like the Sunday event, there were so many people that like we were expecting, and also at the Make Billionaires Pay protest, There was a lot of like older demographics, which I thought was interesting because I feel like when people talk about climate anxiety and stuff, it's usually the younger generations, but it was really inspiring to see that like it was a mix of all generations of people.
Yeah, I also think it's really interesting that a lot of companies and organizations that we spoke with and worked with, they were very interested in creating more climate resiliency strategies, like especially like Lexington Stormwater. They were very, very interested in this. They've noticed that over time, over this past generation, that there has been a lot of impacts of climate change, but a lot of these companies and organizations and government, their hands are really tied right now without having these funding opportunities. So a lot of them were very excited about new resilient strategies and creating them, but they had no way of implementing them. And it was really upsetting for them to have to admit that and say that we know what we can do, we can fix it, but we can't do anything about it right now. So that was really interesting to find that out.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Mary Kate Hart and we are the North Carolina Zoo Project Group.
I'm Haley.
I'm Abby.
I'm Corinne.
I'm Emma.
I'm Jack. I'm Walker.
And I'm Abby. And we were tasked with redesigning the honeybee habitat to promote accessibility and engagement, choosing which plants to plant and where to plant them, and designing signage for education and interaction. For this project, we had the privilege of collaborating with the North Carolina Zoo based in Asheboro. In May, the North Carolina Zoo was named America's Best Zoo by Newsweek's 2025 Reader Choice Awards for the second consecutive year. The NC Zoo spans 2,600 acres of land, making it the world's largest natural habitat zoo, and it hosts over 250 species of wildlife. Grounded in their commitment to inclusivity, equity, respect, and kindness, North Carolina Zoo's mission is to conserve wildlife while educating and inspiring visitors to protect the environment. The zoo's profound impact is made possible by its incredible staff, and we are fortunate to work alongside Jim Harned and the Interior Horticulture Supervisor, and Morgan Blakely, Head of Interior Scapes and Greenhouses. We are so excited and honored to have Jim here with us tonight.
So here's what the honeybee habitat at the NC Zoo currently looks like today. We can see that the space in the garden beds is pretty sparse, and the remaining plants are left vulnerable to further damage by deer, younger children, and visitors there, as well as weeds.
The goals and target conditions were to revitalize the North Carolina Zoo honeybee habitat, and we recommended additional pollinator plants to the gardens. Some of the examples were the Oenthera fruticosa, the southern sundrops, the common bonset, which is the Eupatorium perfoliatum. In the wetter areas, we did the Asarum canadense, the Canadian wild ginger, and the Hortensia virginica, which is the Virginia bluebells. We recommended physical design improvements and provide educational elemental models.
So as for research, successful garden designs rely on understanding site conditions, and we lacked key data on damage patterns, material durability, and visitor movement in the honeybee habitat. Challenges seen in similar projects show how deteriorating signage and poor pathways can harm gardens, reinforcing the need for redesign to protect the beds and improve our visitor flow.
For educational research, we looked at what other institutions and pollinator gardens were doing for education and what worked well for them. We found that visitors learned well through independent, self-paced exploration through educational tools like informational signs and other elements like that. Some of the challenges that zoos face when it comes to education is that visitors typically are going to zoos for leisurely activities or enjoyment and less for educational purposes. So therefore, our elements have to be very flashy and attention-grabbing so that visitors will want to look at them.
And for the flora and fauna component of our project, we conducted research on the native plants of central North Carolina to maximize the biodiversity of the honeybee habitat. This included gathering growing conditions for each of the plants that we selected for the beds, as well as extensive research into pollinator-plant interactions and influences like scent and color on the native bee species already present and also the honeybees. This research provides the ecological data needed to sustain a healthy and functional pollinator garden. And then in the corner you can see our concept map that we initially used to conduct our research and launch our project.
As we worked throughout the semester, we had to use adaptive management strategies to navigate challenges and alter our project's mission in order to better meet our partners' needs.
Our first step in developing a plan to revitalize the honeybee habitat was conducting a site evaluation. Using iNaturalist, zoo records, and Jim and Morgan's expertise, we were able to identify the 55 species of plants currently in the honeybee habitat. Next, we mapped the distribution of these plants across the 7 garden beds and evaluated the soil, sun, and water conditions of the garden beds. We also documented the presence of native pollinators that frequented the garden. That way, our plant recommendations could prioritize honeybees, but also serve the broader ecological community. Among the most frequent visitors to the garden were vespid wasps and several native solitary bees, including mining bees and sweat bees. Finally, we consulted the horticulture team about their previous experiences with the honeybee habitat. They explained that during earlier plantings, several young specimens were completely consumed by deer before they had the opportunity to establish. Past deer assessment measures at the site, primarily spray repellents, proved to be ineffective or unsustainable, especially with frequent rainfalls. From these insights, we recognized that researching and recommending feasible deer management strategies was an essential part of the long-term success for the honeybee habitat.
And then as you can see, this is a sun map that we created based on general observational data we collected from multiple site visits at the honeybee garden. These conditions were mainly influenced by the location of trees in relation to the garden beds, and we used this map to accurately design the beds based on the plant sunlight needs. As you can see, the yellow represents full sun, green represents partial sun, and blue is full shade areas.
So after that initial identification of all the currently existing plants in the honeybee habitat, we used CAD drafting software to map their locations and create an informal plant map that assisted us in the planning of our garden bed layout and also provides the zoo with a visualization of the current assessment of its state before hopefully going forward with our plan. As for the design efforts, we put a lot of work into our deliverables throughout this project. We focused a lot on creating physical iterations to assist in the presentation of our design changes that can be brought to the board. Pictured here is a map of our physical site model, which is also at the back for everyone to see at the end.
So after creating our informal list and map, we were able to create a formal list of plant recommendations, including their scientific name and common name, sun, water, and soil needs, plant type and duration, blooming period and color of the fruits or flowers, deer resistance, pollinators the plants attract, along with height, width, and recommended spacing to ensure everything is planned to scale. The list was then edited based off project partner recommendations, and then placement of plants was drafted in garden beds with a focus on border plants and anchor plants. Lastly, we finalized the formal plant list and digitalized it using CAD and Morpholio trace.
In addition to selecting deer-resistant border plants, we conducted a literature review of best management practices and consulted Morgan to learn how she mitigates deer damage in other pollinator gardens in the zoo. With her insight, we determined that burying open-lid containers filled with a solution of blood meal and water was going to be the best option for deterring deer in the honeybee habitat. This solution produces a strong odor that deer associate with danger, so that effectively deters them, and they associate with predators. Fortunately, this smell is actually not detectable to humans or to visitors, especially in the large open space, for at least 2 weeks. And at that point, the container can be discreetly replaced, requiring minimal maintenance. This approach offers a sustainable and unobtrusive form of deer management that aligns with the zoo's values and preserves the visitor experience.
So with all considered, we were able to create the formal plant map, and out of the 98 formal plants picked out, we only used 59 for our final model, which is actually pictured right here, and we focused on each bed size, current plants present, and specific characteristics. Some border plants we mainly use are Heller holly, dwarf Maryland holly, and Stokes aster, which focus on deer resistance, height, and shading of each bed. And some anchor plants used in our formal map are dovieweed trumpetweed, mountain dog hobble, and coralberry, which will add focal points to our garden beds.
So research shows that interactive pamphlets and maps increase engagement by creating a self-guided tour that gives important information while also assisting visitors throughout the exhibit. So with that being said, we created 3 iterations of an interactive pamphlet for the pollinator garden with differing levels of information for different age groups. So the first is aimed towards elementary age children and includes simple descriptions of pollinator plants and species and a scavenger hunt simple map. The second is aimed more towards middle-aged kids, so a little more complex in the descriptions, but still fit for middle school-age kids. It includes a little longer of a scavenger hunt. And then the final one is for an older audience. It includes more technical terms, while also being easy to digest for people who aren't super sciencey. It doesn't include a scavenger hunt, but has a map with a key including some acre plants.
And then as for signage, our signs help visitors learn about the bee habitat in a fun and in a welcoming way. Each sign highlights key anchor plants that support pollinators, like the sign on the right here, and that are also the most prominent and visible year-round. The sign on the left is for the Bug Hotel, which Walker will talk about later, and it invites kids to explore the Bug Hotel, making the habitat more engaging. We focused on color choices, fonts, format, and of course what information we were going to display and why. And Jim had mentioned that a board comes together to decide final signage. So we made a bunch of mock-ups similar to the signs on the right with different colors, different fonts, and different design types for them to choose from. Oops. And then for other site modifications, we also decided to recommend adjusting the bed height, specifically raising the lowest elevation of bed A by 5 inches to support sun exposure and healthier plant growth. This change also works well with the NC Zoo's custom-made soil compost, which also ensures long-term success for this idea in this part of the project. We also suggest continuing the trellis backing, pictured here, to enhance aesthetics and also provide support for the muscadine vines in the future. Oh my goodness.
Another aspect of our project is the implementation of an insect habitat made out of pithy stems of assorted varieties and untreated wood with holes drilled in various sizes. These are commonly known as bug hotels, insect houses, etc. What these will do is serve as a powerful educational tool that also is going to benefit biodiversity by taking the natural processes that facilitate an insect life cycle and putting them out in the open in a way that is engaging and catching to the eye of a typical viewer that they may never see otherwise.
Our final presented deliverable focused on reinforcing garden bed protection with research financially feasible options. In spatial design, elements such as borders are often misunderstood by younger visitors and are seen as more fun pathways or climbable elements. The rocks border stood out to us throughout our research for its low cost, the availability of them at the zoo already for resource use, as well as its spatial readability and less climbable than a natural smooth border or anything like that they already have at the zoo.
We are delivering the prototypes and proposals to Jim to bring to the approval board. We're expecting the project outcomes and future impacts to be improvement options that revamp the intended use of that honeybee habitat to create an enriching environment for visitors. And I guess you could say our mission statement is to make the habitat interactive, educational, and protect the fauna and flora of the North Carolina region. The 3D site model that you can see at the back table over there is our updated design to provide a physical presentation of our work, and the opportunities for future groups are to assist in planning efforts, observe/match the visitor movement, because I know Jim had concerns of kids trampling some of the plants and the behavior changes.
And we would like to give a big thank you to our project partners, Jim Harned and Morgan Blakely, as well as our librarian, Jesse Ackman, and a special thanks to Robert Charret and Professor Rutz and Professor Strickland. We can now open the floor to any questions that anyone has.
have a captive youth population at the zoo other than
Yes, we did. We looked into particularly using the bars of soap that Charles had mentioned he had used and found some efficacy. So we did find some literature that supports that, particularly tallow-based soaps. They found to be the most effective with perfume or not perfume. It showed that the results were about the same. So there's a potential for using those in small mesh bags. We also looked into potentially monofilament fencing, which is just like single lines of like a fishing line that could be placed along the wooded section behind the habitat, so not directly in the habitat, wouldn't be in the way of any visitors. We also found that hungry deer can kind of always get past the deterrent, but if you give them an alternative food option, that's the best way to kind of give them somewhere else to be eating. So talking with Morgan, she said that there was a space kind of behind Bed C where there was a potential for making that into a natural meadow with forbs and grasses that the deer could go to. So if they had some unpalatable options with our deer-resistant borders and some of those other, like the blood meal, the scent, or the soap, and then actually had another food source availability, we're hoping that all of that together would help to deter them from the habitat, especially while those plants are establishing.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We are the Growing High Point team. Our project is officially called Cultivating Community Through Cookbooks, a Growing High Point project. My name is Ben.
My name is Olivia.
I'm Allie.
I'm Jake.
I'm Eliza.
I'm Natalie.
I'm Caroline.
I'm Anna.
Our project took place in the city of High Point, which is considered a mid-sized city that is located between Greensboro and Winston-Salem. High Point has a diverse community and has a history of large furniture markets in the city.
Our project partner was Growing High Point. Growing High Point is a nonprofit organization founded in 2016 with the goal of transforming High Point's underserved neighborhoods through community engagement, empowerment, and entrepreneurship. They do this primarily by designing and implementing programs which expand the local food systems and provide people with access to fresh produce, which is sometimes a challenge to get in that region.
So High Point faces several socioeconomic challenges that impact their access to food. So 14.7% of residents in High Point live below the poverty line compared to North Carolina's statewide poverty rate of 13.2. As of 2019, 1 in 5 High Point households participated in the SNAP program, and vulnerable populations continue to be the primary participants in this program. And we can see in the image on the right that 20.3% of High Point residents participate in SNAP compared to only 13.7% of North Carolina residents overall.
Well, GHB has some great programs for addressing food insecurity in the region. Our group was tasked with looking at alternative options or additional solutions that might help to address this. And what we were tasked with was starting to make a community cookbook. These are actually a great option for looking at food insecurity because they consider both the socioeconomic and cultural conditions within a community. The recipes within these are often healthy, affordable, and feasible, meaning that people in these under-resourced communities might be able to use the equipment they already have at home to make the recipes. There's also a lot of emphasis on local produce. So for example, with Growing High Point, we really wanted to look at produce that is seasonally available through them and emphasizing that within the cookbook. It can be considered both an everyday cooking tool with a lot of practical functionality, but it has purpose as a historical document as well, because when you read through it, you see a lot of the cultural aspects that go into it, the culinary features of the community. So in the end, they are very engaging, appealing, and accessible compared to some other types of cookbooks, and there are educational components within that make it really a lot more accessible for these types of communities.
So another great option that can be explored and tool to be used is online recipe databases. So a great thing about them are they allow quick and easy access to recipes for users. Another great thing about them is the way that they can be organized.
They can be extremely streamlined, just like by main ingredient, the cook time of the recipes, the overall difficulty of certain recipes, along with the materials and equipment that may or may not be utilized. Now, while these databases may serve as a primary practical tool, they also do serve as a great form of historical documentation as well.
Okay, so looking at our target conditions or project goals, our main goal was to increase the access to health center community-based food education in High Point, and we did this 2 ways. First, we created a cookbook which reflects the local High Point community and features recipes from the local High Point community. So we sent out 2 surveys, one asking about food preferences and ability level with cooking, and then a second asking for recipes and backstories if you have one from the local High Point community. And these are both just to ensure that the cookbook is something that reflects High Point and that the community will actually use and enjoy. Additionally, we have been collecting recipes to input into a database, which is directly accessible from Growing High Point's website, and this is going to have additional recipes that are locally available and reflect the produce you can receive in your Growing High Point boxes.
And then here you can see our project concept map, which kind of guided the entire structure of the project throughout. On the left is the very, very first concept map we made, starting to look at the target condition of, food literacy, food education within High Point. And then on the right, it developed a lot further, and we got more specific to looking at improving access to health-centered, culturally relevant food education in the region. So there are lots of factors influencing this target condition that we were attempting to advance or improve. For example, the local economy, urban food insecure areas, varying access to higher education, things like that. So you can observe those around the outside. And then on the very outer borders of the concept map are some additional factors that should be addressed or considered when attempting to improve food insecurity and education. And then this is also our roadmap to success. So just to briefly summarize, we really focused on volunteering with GHP in the beginning to establish community relationships. We had a process of collecting recipes for the cookbook and the database. And then there was a big process of editing and finalizing both of those products, obviously with the support and the consistent help of GHP along the way. So we kind of just followed these major goals to guide our progress.
Before beginning our project, each of us conducted our own independent research, and this allowed us to develop expertise in our specific areas and that were relevant to cookbook and the database. This was ensuring that we had our foundation to complete our next steps.
So phase 2 was actually collecting the recipes that we wanted to include in our cookbook. We got our recipes from 3 sources: community members from High Point, Growing High Point employees, and the High Point Heritage Research Foundation. So for community members, we had flyers which would direct community members to a survey form which they could fill out to submit their favorite recipes and any stories or personal memories that they had with them, why that recipe was important to them. Similarly, employees also submitted recipes. Growing High Point had some recipes that they were able to provide us with, which was very helpful. And really, the Heritage Center was fascinating because, like we mentioned, community cookbooks are a really good historical source. So in our process of researching community cookbooks, we came across a treasure trove of old archived community cookbooks from different High Point communities. And we were able to take some of these recipes and incorporate them into our cookbook as well, kind of continuing that cultural influence.
So for phase 3, that was the actual design of the cookbook. So a big part of our research was figuring out how community cookbooks actually reflect their community. So we put major emphasis on cultural diversity, especially because High Point is a community that has so many different demographics, many of which have varying degrees of food literacy. So we really wanted it to be accessible And so for the design, we went for a rather kind of simple design because too many elements can kind of be overwhelming for the reader. We also put a lot of emphasis on the stories behind the recipes, and that really kind of brings the cookbook to life.
So here we have an example of one of the recipes in the cookbook. This is Gohan Wat, or Ethiopian collard greens, and it was submitted by Aya Chavez, who works for Growing High Point. So here you can see on the left, we have the ingredients list and the step-by-step instructions. And then on the right, we have an example of one of the community stories that we wanted to include in the cookbook. In my individual research, I found that community storytelling is really good for community engagement. First of all, because of the emotional connections. When people relate to something, when they read this and they see something from their culture or their past, they feel more of a sense of community. Like I said, it's insightful to cultural backgrounds. Aya and several of the other stories in the cookbook, they talk about family history, culture, things that they can take pride in and share with other people. And then another thing is that storytelling is really good at bringing awareness to local missions and social justice issues, which in this case, educating on food insecurity is our main goal. So it's good at doing that.
So along with the cookbook, we were also tasked with creating a recipe database for Growing High Point. So specifically what we were tasked with was the collection and organization of these recipes. Caroline gave us over 300 QR codes that we had to scan and completely break down in a spreadsheet for her, which we are currently still doing. So that was the main part that we worked on. They're going to then take that once we complete that and have a super easy time implementing that directly into their website, which anyone can access at any time. So if they get their food share box and I don't know what to do with these collard greens, they can go to the website, look at the collard green section and see 30, 40 different recipes that they can utilize. And the overall main goal for this recipe database was to essentially create a resource where you could locate past, present, and future Growing High Point recipes that all have an emphasis on healthy food and seasonal crops.
So as for our project outcomes, the first one is the 40-page cookbook that's on all y'all's tables with community recipes, as well as Growing High Point source recipes and recipes from the High Point Library. Second, we have a database featuring Caroline's seasonal recipes, as well as team source recipes. Third, we have individual reports that consider the significance of both of these products to community health, as well as cultural documentation. Fourth, we have a team report that outlines the entire process from start to finish. And then last, we have a much deeper knowledge of Growing High Point's operations and also how to support community development in economically disadvantaged communities.
And then we also have some future recommendations for other groups or teams that might look into creating a volume 2, future issues of the cookbook. So we created some fantastic relationships with GHP along the way, which was awesome. But we would love to see future teams maybe engage more directly with the community, whether that be through interviews, holding cooking sessions, something of that nature, just to get people directly involved with the process of designing the cookbook. Because while we did survey them to collect the recipes, we gathered community stories. At the end of the day, it would have been, I think, very rewarding to see a very hands-on engagement with that. This also means diversifying some of the community outreach tools. While we relied mostly on digital surveys, there are some inaccessible populations that don't necessarily have access to that technology. So maybe this means in the future looking at an emphasis on physical forms or really just going out more into the community to speak with people. It would also be really interesting to look at one cultural group particularly, maybe a particular neighborhood, and trying to map out that culinary culture. Because while we went across the board looking at, Ethiopian food, and really from places all across the world. It would be cool to see as well whether there's a particular neighborhood that has an extensive culinary culture there. And then ultimately, we think one of the measures of success could be the use of surveys long-term to, poll the citizens and see whether the use of this community cookbook has been able to help them with their food literacy, whether they've really been using it in order to increase their food education.
When we originally started this project, we just intended it to be a resource to help combat food insecurity. And that is what we made, but as the project progressed, it really started to transform as we learned more about this wonderful community and this wonderful city. And over time, the project really became just as much about providing people with ways to cook food that they might not be familiar with, as it did just become just a love letter to High Point and High Point culture as a whole. And we were really grateful that we got the opportunity to meet all these wonderful people, to hear all these wonderful stories. And we are so grateful to Growing High Point for giving us the opportunity not only to tell these stories, but to tell these stories in a way that doesn't often get a lot of attention, through cooking, through recipes, through that shared heritage. Thank you for that.
We would also just like to recognize the crucial contributions of Caroline, who's sitting over there. We were so glad she could make it tonight. The Growing High Point team as a whole, they were consistently there to assist us with the project. The High Point community members who submitted recipes, who were willing to share their stories with us. And then, of course, Professor Rutz and Strickland for being there along the way. So yeah, thank you.
Did you all cook or test these recipes?
Yeah, we tested some of the recipes. There were a lot of recipes submitted, so we didn't go through all of them. But when we had time, we gathered in teams, got all the ingredients together, and then kind of hunkered down and tried to cook some of them. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, those are actually the recipes that we cooked are good pictures of. So like you see the pumpkin pie or like the tomatoes and potatoes recipe. Yeah.
Yeah, all the photos in the cookbook to ourselves.
How did you determine which recipes were put in the cookbook and which ones were reserved for people on the page?
So I would say that there's a pretty clear division between them because we wanted to put a lot of emphasis on the community submitted or contributed recipes for the cookbook. And then the online database is ones that were either provided by Growing High Point as maybe ones they had recommended in the past during the farmers market, or additional recipes that we researched online. So there aren't as many community or cultural ties to those recipes necessarily. Those are more so for people who want to know what to do with seasonal produce versus the cookbook where you're kind of looking at a cultural story at the same time.
Do you have a plan of kind of distribution of the physical cookbooks?
So Growing High Point works with a local print shop in the High Point area. So our cookbook is going to go there, and that's where most of the distribution is going to happen.
We also plan to give a copy of the recipe book to all of the community members that did submit them, and also as well to the professors who saw out the whole project.
Oh yeah, the Gordega is a truck that goes around, and they also take SNAP, the supplemental nutrition program, and yeah, they like go around and they like sell produce that either Growing High Point through their urban garden or through farm shows. And they like give it more like cheaper, and so more people are able to afford it.
Thank you.